Hello, everybody out there. Greetings. Hello and welcome. Please drop a note in the chat. Let me know that you can hear me. My name is Deanna Sophia. I do use they, them pronouns. And I'm calling in tonight from the lands of the Osage peoples, the Ohlone peoples, and the Missouri peoples, past and present. And tonight we're covering the third foundation of mindfulness meditation for Mental Health Awareness Month, which is mindfulness of thoughts. And if you're like me, you probably have a lot of thoughts going on about today and recently. We have all probably seen the news recently of more violence in our world, and I'd like to take a moment right now just to kind of pause for that and hold space for the families that are affected, and to hold space for us that are joining here to arrive with all of the complicated thoughts and feelings that we have. So if you join me for a little moment of silence, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, friends. Hello there from Virginia. I appreciate you dropping into the chat where you're from. And yeah, today we're talking about mindfulness of thoughts. And every day it's a good day to talk about mindfulness of thoughts. It is a very complicated world that we live in. And mindfulness meditation certainly helps us cope with that. There are a lot of things that are out of our control, and there are some things that we can cultivate our own control with our own body. And mindfulness of thoughts is one of those, because we cannot actually stop our thoughts, but we can develop a relationship with them to know how to be with them, as it were. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get into it, shall we? So like I said, mindfulness of thoughts is the third foundation of mindfulness. We have talked about mindfulness of the body and the breath in our first talk. Second talk was about mindfulness of emotions, and tonight we're doing the third foundation of mindfulness for, of course, Mental Health Awareness Month. And mindfulness meditation is very much a tool. It is very much a technique, and it is very much a skill. And these are things that we can apply to ourselves and to our existence and how we are interacting in the world to help cultivate more ease, less suffering. And so mindfulness is a tool because we can use it to construct, build, and we can also use it to decompose things, to break down, to return, to release. It is a technique because we can apply it in situations that we find ourselves in or that we come across. So it's a very active technique that we can employ in a lot of different situations. And it's also a skill because it's something that we can cultivate being better at. And it is very much a process. But that a process is also a practice. It is definitely not something that we get right every single time. And it's definitely something that takes time to cultivate, very intentional time. And I like to talk about mindfulness as being the practice of kind of a dial of balance, to recalibrate ourselves. It's a constant state of recalibration. So we've got to calibrate our balance, our grounding, our stability, because there are always things that are going to throw us off our stability and our grounding. So mindfulness acts as that active calibration point for us. And that's why it's very much helpful when it's practiced regularly. There are some days where you're really glad that you have as a practice as your friend. And then there are some days where you're totally great and you're just cultivating that practice. I have never been upset any time that I've chosen to sit down and meditate. As someone who has a lot of mental health and physical health challenges, it has always gone there to be there for me, whether I needed it that day or not. And so mindfulness meditation is known as Vipassana meditation in Pali, and that translates to insight or clear seeing. So we are practicing deliberately seeing into the reality of life. And the reality of thoughts is they just happen. If you're new to mindfulness meditation, you might be thinking, I can't quiet my thoughts to meditate. I can't get still to meditate. I'm too busy to meditate, too unfocused, too resistant, too fearful, too angry, too hurt, too annoyed, too sleepy. All of these things that can be thoughts in our mind of why we can't practice meditation. And you might be somebody out there right now having some of those thoughts. I'd actually love to know right now what thoughts are actually coming up with you in this moment in time. If you would like to drop them in the chat, just to get a sense of where everybody is out there, I'd love to know. And just in the process of kind of thinking about this, hi there, yes. Just in the process of kind of thinking about this, we're in a way practicing mindfulness of thoughts. And so the thing that mindfulness of thoughts teaches us is that thoughts just happen. They happen a lot. And when we practice mindfulness meditation of thoughts, we're intentionally, actively being aware of our presence, where our thoughts are in the moment. We're thinking about our awareness of our direct experience of the present moment. Yeah, I've got in the chat too many thoughts to catalog. They are running around this evening. Mine as well. Mine have been doing that like a lot lately. So I feel you out there for sure. And so mindfulness is that practice of being in our own body and remembering that we're a human body that are experiencing thoughts. And I started just practicing 5 minutes of focusing on my breathing. Yeah, good. Starting off small, bit by bit, because thoughts can just run away with us. And this is kind of what this practice helps with. It helps us cope with that. So you might find that you have intrusive thought moments, inopportune thought moments where thoughts are just taking over. Or you might have moments where your thoughts are absolutely blank. I've definitely had that public speaking before, can confirm. Yeah. So when we practice mindfulness meditation of thoughts, we actually start to notice that there's more going on. There's way more going on. And that can be a little scary at first. When we move half as fast, we notice twice as much. And so it seems counterintuitive that in order to release the grip that intrusive, racing, endless thoughts can have, is by facilitating a space to allow thoughts to happen. But the reality of the situation is, the insight of the situation is, that practicing mindfulness of thoughts is actually the practice of becoming aware that we're even having thoughts to begin with. There's a little nuance to that. So I'd like for us to try something together. So we've definitely got some thoughts out there in the world. For just 30 seconds, I'm going to be quiet. But I first want you to take a moment, notice that you have your body, maybe shake it out, settle into your chair. It's a comfortable, dignified position. And stretch it out, do what you got to do, get the willies out. Notice that you're in a chair or you're on your floor. And wherever you're joining from, connect with that sense of you having a body and feeling a surface that you are on top of, feeling from the inside out. And so I'm going to be quiet for the next 30 seconds. And I want you to notice, now we're thinking on our body, we're feeling from the inside out. I want you to notice when you have your first thought. And in fact, I want you to drop it into the chat when that happens, because I'm curious. So we've got our body connecting with the chair, connecting with the floor, connecting with our sense feeling. We can feel where our hands are. And I'm going to be quiet for these 30 seconds. Go. All right, that was about 30 seconds. I got one note that came in roughly about 20 seconds. About how long was it before your first thought came in? If you want to drop that into the chat, I'm definitely curious. See, for me, it was probably about 10, 15 seconds in. And I'm leading this thing. Yeah, what else? What else do we have in the chat? We have thinking about thoughts. I occasionally have trouble concentrating or focusing in work meetings because my mind is swimming all over the non-related thoughts. Yeah. I've got about 5 seconds in to our 30 of having our first thought. The word thinking was echoing pretty instantaneously. Yep. Yeah. So it's our first exercise. We're going to do that same kind of exercise again, only this time I want you to actively try to not think about thoughts. So, like, actively try not thinking about thoughts. So, let's shake it out and settle it again. Connect with your seat, connect with your feet, connect with your breath. Ready, go. And time. So, did you find that you had more thoughts? You can drop that into the chat. We'd love to know about how many thoughts you think that you had in that time. See if you can kind of quantify what your thought process was. How much was going on in there? Way more thoughts. Way more thoughts. Yep. When thinking about it, way more thoughts. Did anybody have like one long thought? So instead of more thoughts, it was just one long thought that took up the whole time. Inner monologue took over, had an ABBA song playing. Hey, man, there could be a lot worse thoughts. This time, breathe was the word on echo. Okay. Yeah. So even when we're rehearsing, even when we're trying, even when we don't want to think thoughts, they still just happen. You cannot you cannot stop that cascade of thoughts. So we've noticed we can't stop thinking thoughts. That is the reality of the situation. It is said that the mind secretes thoughts like our mouth just secretes saliva. It just freaking happens. And so mindfulness is not the practice of emptying ourselves with thoughts. I hear a lot of folks say, I can't practice meditation or I'm bad at it because I can't empty your mind. You can't empty your mind. It doesn't work like that. Our mind is our CPU. It's the central processing unit. It is keeping us alive. So mindfulness, again, is that process of bringing awareness to the fact that we're thinking thoughts. So that's thought patterns, mental states, mental machinations, spirals, ruminating. Um, we can have a cascade of really delightful thoughts. And that can be like creativity, inspiration, excitement, you know, creating things in our mind, make believe in our mind. Used to be real good at that as a kid. And we can also have harmful thought patterns. Raise your hand if you've ever had harmful thought patterns. I definitely have. Definitely have. Those harmful thought patterns can be as simple as I'm just going to watch one more show before bed, fully knowing that we're staying up too late and it's going to really not be fun. Hand up in the chat. Yep, we can all high five probably on that one, for sure. Look, I didn't come to mindfulness because it felt well. I got another hand in the chat. Indeed. So I know probably everybody's raising their hands out there. I can't see you, but this is the nature of the human mind. This is insight meditation. We're looking into the nature of the human mind. Lots of hands going up in the chat. So what we learn and practice with mindfulness meditation is shifting our awareness to witnessing thoughts. So it's a little different than not being with our thoughts. It's noticing thoughts. It's subtle at first. There's a subtle difference. This is why we practice it. You practice it with a guide and someone who can walk you into the meditation and help offer guidance there. So it can be subtle at first. And then when you practice a while, it becomes just unshakably noticeable. Thought patterns that you're just thinking. And I'm going to drop a little asterisk right here to talk more about trauma-sensitive practice momentarily. But I first want to further explain that the practice of mindfulness of thoughts is a practice of being still. It's open monitoring. It's not concentrating on our thoughts. Open monitoring, seeing what comes up, seeing that thoughts are coming up and that they're there and that they shift. And even the harmful thoughts can come in. They can take different shapes. They can shift. The beautiful ones can too. That is how inspiration and creativity works. It's not the fact that they're just thoughts. It's how we feel about them, usually. So thoughts end up being kind of like clouds in the sky. They come in, they shift around and move. They have different shapes. And then they shift and they move on. And a different thought comes in. So practicing mindfulness of thoughts is the practice of witnessing thoughts, learning how to be aware of them without becoming the thoughts, without attaching our body to the thoughts, without attaching our action to the thoughts. And one way that this is done is by naming our thoughts, such as planning thoughts, rehearsing thoughts, doing thoughts, solving, craving, worrying, catastrophizing. Start naming those thoughts, the types of thoughts that we have. So practicing mindfulness of thoughts is teaching ourselves to recognize that typical thought patterns just happen in your brain. And because mindfulness is very much also a compassion practice, it's also shifting our awareness back to the present moment, back into our body, back with our breath, back with the sounds of the room, back with the guided voice of your instructor, your coach, and being able to notice that those thoughts shifted like a cloud in the sky in that time. And this is just incredibly helpful for interrupting harmful thought patterns. building building the capacity to transform those those harmful thought patterns. So this is a neurological response that is absolutely beneficial to trauma recovery and mental illness, chronic illness. And it's actually a thing called neuroplasticity. So that is the brain's innate ability to create new neural pathways. And we're going to talk more about that next week, the next talk in the theory series. How mindfulness supports trauma recovery, which very much also includes mental and physical illness, chronic illness, tremendous grief, systemic oppression. Put all those things in that umbrella, because those things can very much overwhelm the human body. And so going back to a minute for thinking about mindfulness as that dial. There are the 4 foundations that support skillful awareness of the present moment to support our total well-being. There's mindfulness of the body and the breath. So that's resting our awareness with our body, with our breath, when we need the capacity to support our physical well-being. So down-regulating a very overactive nervous system. That happens in the body. It doesn't happen by what we think about it. Or it can help us activating an underactive nervous system. I taught a class over the weekend for performers, mindfulness techniques for performers. And the body can also get into that freeze mode, that catatonic mode, where you just cannot do anything. And so practicing mindfulness of the body actually helps us reactivate that, because movement is what we need in those. You can kind of jostle some stuff loose, synthesize lots of things that are weighing us down. And then there's mindfulness of emotions, which we talked about last week, which is, again, firstly noticing how emotions show up in the body, the physical sensations themselves. And then learning to interpret our own body's language about that experience of emotions. And attending to the body's wellness first. See how everything kind of comes back to the body? Here we are today with the 3rd foundation, mindfulness of thoughts. It's definitely extremely difficult sometimes to practice mindfulness of thoughts, or even emotions like I talked about last week, especially in trauma recovery and illness. And this is why first establishing a practice, an embodied practice of mindfulness of the body in a trauma-sensitive way is very important, because the body is the work. It does the work to process the things that happen in our mind. It's carried out through our actions, through our body. And this is the point in the conversation that I like to remind people that the mind is actually in service of the body. It's not the other way around. The mind is the CPU. It just interprets the messages. The sensing part of our body, it's any of the 5 senses that are alive with us and available with us. That's what carries out the decisions, the actions. So the body cannot think itself better. All of this happens in our nervous system, our message receptors. And this is why it's also extremely difficult for trauma survivors, folks who experience mental illness, addiction, chronic illness, tremendous grief, neurological differences, to regain that agency of the body, because the body is difficult to be with sometimes, or it's uncomfortable, or it's unwelcome, or it's unsafe. So again, we're going to talk more about specific mindfulness for trauma recovery next week. This is very important stuff. I feel very passionate about it. Trauma survivor myself, and there are a lot of variations that we can do to support that. But today we're speaking about mindfulness, the tool, the technique, the skill to cultivate. So mindfulness of thoughts. We know that thoughts can often, much like emotions, bring us into a state of trance, where we're not really with ourselves. We're off in a thought pattern. We're off on a trail. We're off ruminating. We go on living in our head instead of our body. There's a wonderful quote I will drop in here from James Joyce. Mr. Duffy lived a little distance from his body, regarding his own acts with doubtful side glasses. He had an odd autobiographical habit which led him to compose in his mind from time to time a short sentence about himself, containing a subject in the third person and a predicate in the past tense. So, a reminder that predicate tells us about the subject. So, how much do we do that in our mind? That we're talking about ourselves in third person, things that happened in the past. Mr. Duffy lived a little distance from his body. The mind tends to get caught up in itself and actually neglect the thing that supports the wellness of the mind, the body. And that is, again, why mindfulness meditation is like a dial. It includes compassion practice. And compassion, again, is self-love in action. Actionable self-love, like the actual act of loving yourself, loving others. It's about knowing when to apply the right mindfulness that is the right in that skillful moment to your whole well-being. Mindfulness of emotions. Oh my God, I'm feeling all these emotions. Let me bring my awareness back to my body. Am I even breathing? Are my feet on the ground? Am I in the present moment? Because you also probably know that avoiding thoughts is kind of also thinking a trail of thoughts. It's also something that the mind is really good at. Active avoidance. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the science right now. I think this talk is going to go long today because I think it's important to understand how things work in order to be able to better work with them. So we aim to work with the mind, not against it. We want to find a flow instead of a constriction. We want to find an openness and an ease for suffering instead of an armoring that also keeps us out of direct experience of the body. The way the mind is built, it stores memories and emotions in the same place. This serves an evolutionary advantage of learning based on awareness of time. So human beings are sentient beings that have a concept of time. And if we're thinking thoughts that are unpleasant, they can often lead to having harmful emotions attached to them. And conversely, the brain can get used to thinking pleasant thoughts too. It can actively avoid other thoughts. And because, again, memories and emotions are processed through the same place in the brain, and the mind gets better at what it practices, the mind wants to be efficient. So the mind can get used to avoiding thoughts, which is itself a thought. The mind can actually actively spend energy avoiding thinking things, like about how one more episode of Netflix is going to push your bedtime and make you too tired for tomorrow. You like actually spend money, or not money, actually spend energetic currency avoiding that. But it's in there. You're knowing it. You're spending energy on it. So we're not going to really dig much more into the types of thought patterns today, pleasant, unpleasant thought patterns, because we'd be digging more into trauma recovery and addiction and depression and anxiety and chronic illness. And I suspect that your brains might also currently in this moment be thinking about some of those things. We're not going to practice that today. We're just here to talk about mindfulness, the tool, mindfulness, the technique, that mindfulness is a skill to cultivate. And we do that by cultivating supportive and regenerative anchors first, the body, the breath, the sounds in the room if our body is unsafe. I taught over the weekend for performers a sacred object, your favorite crystal, your favorite auntie, caregiver, a favorite place, a favorite smell, sensorial things that can be an anchor when thoughts are too much. And all of this mindfulness of thoughts, like we sit, we see the thought come in, we watch it shift, we watch it shift away, and notice that other thoughts come in. So that's how we develop this process of integrating the tough stuff. We're not going to go into the tough stuff today. That's what the practice is for. That's what my coaching is for. But I'll just say that mindfulness helps us cultivate regaining that agency, that choice to return from the trance of thoughts. Not being able to choose that they happen, but being able to choose to come back to the body, to notice that we've been away, to apply that self-compassion. Because the practice is noticing, open monitoring, noticing a stimuli of thoughts, becoming aware, becoming the witness that the thoughts are just happening. Being able to name them, allow them to exist, to shift. The naming of them really helps tremendously with not becoming attached to the thought itself, the story of the thought. Because we all have our top 10 thoughts. You probably have your top 10 regular thoughts that happen up there. So see if you can take this practice away with you today. The practice of naming your types of thoughts, your top 10 tunes, the planning, the solving, the rehearsing, the worrying, the surviving, the catastrophizing, the grasping. See if you can start naming some of those top 10 tunes. And I want you to then practice noticing what happens to the original thought when you're able to shift to witnessing the thoughts. You can say, hey, thought, I see you. You're a thought. You're right there. You're this kind of thought. And then see about connecting with that expansive experience of watching the thoughts like a cloud in the sky. And as they drift away, return your awareness to your anchor, to your body, to your breath, to the fact that you have been breathing that whole time, to the fact that you're in a room, there's other sounds, there's maybe even other pets or people going on, that you're there in your chair. And as you practice becoming this witness to the thoughts, you begin to understand that thoughts are impermanent, which is one of the marks of human existence. Impermanence. Everything changes. Mountains eventually get eroded over time. Rain falls in a different way, in a different location and speed every single day. It's constant change, constant recalibration. And so there becomes this way of having radical sustainability in knowing that things always change, that there becomes this sense of freedom in knowing that things are always going to shift. That's what the practice of mindfulness of thoughts supports for our total well-being. I'm never going to recommend that you don't think thoughts. I'm never going to recommend that you think traumatic thoughts. I'm never going to recommend that you only think positive thoughts either. The point of this is to not get stuck thinking thoughts. So I am going to recommend that you take the time, the still time, to discern your own thoughts. What are your thoughts? What are society's thoughts? What are thoughts that are no longer resourceful for you? And practice releasing those thoughts. Practice that live action self-care, that compassion in those moments that point you to thoughts that are hurt and suffering. These are things I can't decide for you. All I can do is point you to awareness of your body. When you move half as fast, you notice twice as much. So mindfulness of thoughts happens bit by bit. You can't rush taking in the whole sky the whole time. You can't swallow all that at once. Mindfulness of thoughts is a both sky and cloud situation, both forest and trees. It's not an either or. It's a shift in awareness to hold the entire experience. It supports our discernment, our agency, wisdom, compassion, love, and action. So, mindfulness of thoughts establishes this understanding, again, a language that you can cultivate with your own body, with your own nervous system, about how your specific body needs nourishment in each moment. Get to understand what's a challenging thought, what's a messy thought, what's a thought that was maybe inspiring and yet tangled up with thoughts that are scary or overwhelming. Learn to detangle those thoughts. Give me mindfulness of your planning thoughts, your survival thoughts. You can discern what's a cluster of thoughts, a thought pattern. What's a thought that you're ready to engage with in order to interrupt, to support your dignity and well being. And you can understand what thought patterns are not ready to be touched yet, and that's totally okay. So, my coaching with mindfulness meditation practice in general, we do practice thinking beautiful thoughts, nourishing thoughts, self love thoughts, thoughts of goodwill, compassionate thoughts, and letting those thoughts too appear like clouds in the sky. Let them shift, take on different shapes, move along just out of our view, just in time to see a new cloud appear in the sky. So, in closing, mindfulness of thoughts is the practice of becoming aware that you are a thinking being, and that you're a thinking being that also has a whole body that needs your support too. You're a thinking being that aims to and inspire care for your body, because your body supports your mind. You're a thinking being that is absolutely imperfectly divine and absolutely deserving of love, safety, dignity, connection, and well being, no matter freaking what. Thank you, friends. We did go long today. It's a very thoughtful day. I would love to know questions in the chat. I have a question. Do you find that if you write down the thoughts, that it helps move them out of your mind because you released it to paper? Absolutely. 100,000%. I actually keep a daily journal. And I started it in probably 2018. I used to journal a lot as a kid. I had the diary. I was an 80s kid, so I had that the fun, squishy diary with all the colors and the little lock and all the different colored pens. And so I brought that back into my life in 2018. That was a really transitionary year for me, and I knew something large was coming, and I started then, and I do it every single day. Every single day. There might be times where I go a couple days, but I sit down and I catch up with it. And so I've got journals every day because it does help me go through that. And I can go back to different times and say, this is what was going on in my life. And it actually really helps me see my progress. And I really noticed that it helped me regain some of my just spatial awareness and time awareness, especially when I got sober. I was able to recover a lot more of what happened in my day. And so another thing that happens in trauma recovery, when you get triggered, your body can either speed up or slow down. So being triggered can bring up memories where it takes you back into the past of things that happened, and it can be like you're re-experiencing those things all over again. So writing down my thoughts was absolutely a way of helping me witness exactly what was going on in that day. And so it really helped me to have it was just an extra witness. Like, you can do the witnessing in meditation, writing them down gave me an extra witness for every single day. I could go back and like really parse out, like, this was my thoughts, this is what was going on, these are the thought patterns, and look at me, I have shifted, it's a different day, I've moved on, all of these other things have happened. So I'm a huge fan of writing things down, and I very much, like, those of you that are taking the class, like, very much recommend having a meditation journal, because it'd be just super beneficial to growth. That was a really great question. Thank you. Thank you for the thoughts. Indeed. Throw some good thoughts in today. Do I have any other questions out there? Anything that was difficult to understand? Anything messy? Anything that you want to poke at me with? I love having challenging questions. And just at me next time. I wonder what that was about. I'll just holler at you next time when you're going into your thought patterns. Is that what that was about? I can definitely do that. Netflix. Oh, Netflix. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. This is mindfulness of thoughts. You can be like, oh, but that's also mindfulness of the body. So if you turn your awareness to your body, you can be like, okay, let me check in with my body. Okay, wait a second. My body is actually tired. It it wants to be cozy. So it wants to be feeling better in the morning. Let me make it go to bed. Yeah, mindfulness is a dial. You can pick and choose, see what's going on for the day. Indeed. Let me give a little bit of space for any more questions before we say goodbye tonight. And while I'm giving space for that, I'll remind you that my introductory for mindfulness class is starting next month on June 7th. It's a 6-week course, 7 p.m. Central. It'll be an hour and 15 minutes. Maybe give a little time because sometimes I like to talk long and I like to make sure that everybody has the support that they need to. The idea of the body and the mind order was fascinating. Definitely have issue with that order. Absolutely. Yeah, we in society are not programmed to take care of the body. So that is definitely your practice. So seeing when things are painful, things are complicated, things are messy or whatever, check in with your body, see what is actually going for it, and see what are the messages coming up there. And if you're not used to connecting with the body, like, it's going to take some time to figure out what is going on with that. But my body has never failed me in letting me know exactly what it needs. Like, I didn't understand the language at first, but I've taken the time to understand the language. And I'm like, now I can recognize it. And I say, oh, we need connection and love. Oh, I need physical activity. Oh, I need to go eat a vegetable or drink some water or go get sunshine. Like, these things. Yeah. Yeah. Heart is in charge. So, like, the heart is what pumps our blood. Our blood is our life force. It helps bring oxygen to the rest of the body. So if mindfulness is about the breath, and breath is life, it's the heart that does all of the pumping. It's the heart that speeds up when we don't feel good. And it's the heart that hurts when we don't feel good. The brain is just there to help send the electrical signals. So that heart space, like, there is an absolute connection with that. And it's not mind over heart. So gotta give space for our sweet little 2022 hearts in here, for sure. All right, friends. Well, we've gone a little bit long tonight, but I appreciate you being with me tonight. Do check out my website, deannadanger.com. Mindfulness. Get signed up. I am definitely looking for a few more folks to make sure that I meet my minimum requirement for the student evaluations. And again, like, it's also open for open practice. Like, I've set up weekly practices, so you can learn the thing, and then once a week, alternating Wednesdays and Sundays, you can just sit and practice, because skills take time to practice and get better at. All right, folks. Many thanks to you all. Next week is how mindfulness supports trauma recovery. All of this for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I just appreciate the heck out of you all being here. And I send you all of the love and all of the support and all of the ease and stability in the midst of everything that unfolds in, around, and through you. Till next time, friends.